So I'm very honored to be back and see so many familiar faces. 2 years ago and 3 years ago, I had the honor of being the science communication intern with the UEC, and uh, many of you were very patient with me as I learned more about science communication through these these presentations and uh, lots of leading volunteer groups and so on. And now I am wrapping up a master's degree in science writing. Actually, will be submitting my thesis later today. Uh, and then we'll see what's next. But this program, this internship program, definitely was one of the things that convinced me that science communication was something I really wanted to do. And I'm very grateful that I was able to be a part of this community and to come back to talk about pretty Lepidoptera, specifically monarch butterflies, which, as I mentioned, I had the chance to talk about almost 3 years ago. And I want to be very clear that I'm here to talk about this conversation, this debate about whether monarchs need our help, whether, about the conversation around charismatic species getting more attention than non-charismatic species in the conservation world. But I want to highlight the debate rather than making a specific point because I love monarchs and I love the monarch conservation work that I've been able to do. I don't know if you can see this little guy here. I took this picture my first summer with the UEC, and then these are a couple of high school interns who were with us that summer as well, helping us with the monarch larva monitoring project, which is an initiative to harness community science power to help gather data for uh, entomologists and conservationists to analyze to figure out what's happening with monarch populations, especially by looking at milkweed plants and counting larvae and counting eggs. This was one of my favorite parts of both summers. Put a lot of my sweat into educating community members about monarchs and about monarch conservation efforts. And I definitely repeated a lot of talking points. They are like saying they're not formally on the endangered species list, which is true, but there is evidence that their populations are declining. And, just spent a lot of time emphasizing that monarchs did need our help. And I was very attached to that idea. And I had, spent so much time looking at these cute little caterpillars and, uh, just falling in love with them. So by the time I finished my second internship, I was really a monarch lover. And I know saying that monarchs are your favorite butterfly is like saying the Beatles are your favorite band, or honestly, it might even be like saying that you've heard of music. But I do love monarchs, uh, and it is because they're beautiful. That is a big part of it, um, and I'm okay with that. But this past spring, I decided to try my hand for an assignment at writing about a pretty complex element of monarch science. And I found this really complicated paper that I think didn't translate as well as I'd anticipated into like a really snappy kind of science communication um, for the broader public kind of piece. But I still learned a lot. This is not the focus of my piece, but I'll just share what is really cool about this. So monarchs eat milkweed exclusively, and the milkweed plant has in turn evolved to produce several toxins which are called cardinalides, uh, which are designed to poison and kill the monarch larvae. But in turn, they're sort of locked in this evolutionary arms race. And so in turn, the larvae have evolved the ability to sequester the toxins in their bodies and then sort of recycle them so that they are effective against monarch predators. So a bird who eats an adult monarch, it won't kill it, but it'll get sick enough that it learns to avoid that bright orange and black coloring. So that's been known for a long time. That's not the new science from this piece. But what they did discover is that since milkweed produces a lot of different cardinalides, uh, and I just have this up to show that I was kind of in over my head. But since it produces so many different cardinalides, some of them are more toxic than others, and monarchs have evolved to sequester specifically the ones that are least harmful to them and most harmful to their predators. And that is really cool to me. And I wanted, I talked to this author, Christophe Duplay. I also say Anurag Agarwal is like the monarch man in the world. And I didn't get a chance to talk to him, but it's cool to talk to one of um, his co-authors, but I wanted to talk to someone who was not involved in this study just to get an outside view. And I ended up identifying this entomologist at the University of Georgia named Dr. Andy Davis, who is the author of many papers on monarchs as well. And I reached out to him. He was very enthusiastic about talking to me. And then we got into the interview and he wanted to talk about the piece, but I discovered that he was on this crusade to tell as many journalists as possible that he doesn't think that monarchs need the amount of conservation attention that they've been getting. And I was kind of trying to put a conservation, timely spin on the article. And he is very passionate about telling as many journalists as he can that that should not be the focus of any like attention that monarchs get in the press. He really likes to sort of portray himself as a lone crusader in this fight, and he is really like a mover and shaker in this world. He has this. This is like a pretty representative quote from what it was like to talk to him. Um, this is kind of him trying to get in the mind of someone who's really passionate about conserving monarchs. But he runs this Facebook page called The Thoughtful Monarch, and there's a lot of drama in the Lepidoptera conservation world surrounding Dr. Andy Davis and um, the his efforts to convince people that monarchs don't deserve the conservation attention that they're getting or don't need it at least, and also most controversially that the conservation attention might actually be harming the monarch population. So I want to talk a little bit about the points that he brought up. I will say I was kind of I was really a data point for him because I talked to him. I took like the few quotes that I did get for the other paper I was talking about, and I just used that like this. I just published those as if we hadn't had this conversation, but it really stuck with me, and I did want to do something with it eventually. And he has gotten attention in the press for this specific crusade of his in the past, but not from the article that I wrote. But to answer the question, do monarch butterflies really need our help? We have to start by asking a few other questions. Questions about their endangered status, questions about what conservation efforts look like and whether they're effective or not effective, or even, possibly detrimental. And then also just about the bigger question of charismatic animals getting more attention in science more generally, and also in the conservation. So as I mentioned, monarch butterflies are not on any, within the US, not on any formal endangered species lists. And if you go through the data that I helped collect, that many community scientists helped collect for the monarch larva monitoring project, you can see some big fluctuations, but overall, there's not a major decline in monarch populations in Wisconsin and the northern part of North America. The big problem is that the generation of monarchs that migrates to Mexico every year at the end of the summer, they are facing a lot of threats. And so it seems like, counterintuitive to say that these are facing threats, these migratory monarchs, but not the population that's descended from them each year, the generations that just stay in Wisconsin. But, and this is a shot from Mexico, all these migratory monarchs gathering. But so far, the population has been pretty good at bouncing back. They lay so many eggs. They are kind of able to make up for the dangers that they're facing. And those dangers are climate change, getting very hot in Mexico, also just environmental degradation, habitat degradation. There's fewer places for them to gather, and also pollution. Those are the big threats that the migratory population of monarchs is facing. And that is a really serious problem. It could become, likely will become serious enough that we will start to see it affecting the monarchs further north. But up here, not formally on any endangered species lists, and I would agree with that decision to keep them off the endangered species lists. And then the next question you have to ask is, what are the conservation methods that we're seeing in response to people who are hearing that endangered or that monarch populations are facing threats? And that is true. They are facing threats, especially from community scientists. And again, I want to be very clear. I love community scientists. I have no ill will toward any of these conservation methods. I really am moved by how much time and energy and love people are dedicating to conserving monarchs. And I just want to kind of relay the conversation that I've seen happening around the efficacy of these methods. So first one, a lot of people will hear on the news or on social media that monarchs are threatened and that we need to, the best way to conserve them is to plant more milkweed. And it's true that monarchs lay their eggs on all species of milkweed, but up here in Wisconsin, what we have is common milkweed, which is everywhere. You see this, like, raggedy ones on the side of the highway. Like, this is really resilient. Not every place that milkweed can grow is an ideal habitat for monarchs and monarch larvae, of course, but it's really a staple of a Milwaukee summer for me. But folks who maybe just miss a little bit of information will go out and buy the first milkweed plant that they find to plant in their yard because they love monarchs so much and want to help them so much. And they might buy this species called tropical milkweed, which is not native, so that's a red flag right away. And it's also known to be a host for a protozoa that can harm monarch larvae. It also has a higher toxin level than than common milkweed, so it can be to the point where it's no longer beneficial to monarch larvae who are trying to sequester that toxin, and it can be really dangerous to them. So this is, not an example of any people doing anything that is necessarily harmful to monarchs, just one sort of misstep in a really wonderful effort to conserve these butterflies. So that's one point of concern, one thing that Dr. Andy Davis brought up during our conversation. And then the other really common conservation method that we see is folks collecting monarch caterpillars off of milkweed plants and rearing them indoors. And this is like a really common, educational like initiative. Like you'll see a lot of monarchs being reared in like kindergarten classrooms, and it's a really beautiful way to introduce children to the world of these insects, in my opinion. But there is a lot of data. There are a lot of data showing that this can really affect monarchs' migratory patterns and can really affect their ability to migrate to Mexico. And there are also some data that show that monarchs reared in captivity are slightly smaller than monarchs that pupate in the wild. So this is another thing that I think is just so beautiful, that people want to spend so much time dedicating their lives to rearing these beautiful creatures. And it's also something that we should be having a conversation about, how we can maybe talk to people about how many is safe to rear. I don't think it's a be all end all thing, but it is an important conversation that it's not necessarily beneficial to these monarchs. You're not necessarily protecting them from predators by doing this. You might be putting them in danger in other ways. And then this brings us into a much larger conversation about charismatic animals, which is just, cute. It's very subjective, obviously, but cute, cuddly or large animals that humans feel that they can connect with in some way. I have a real soft spot for like really weird animals, especially because I think that humans just don't realize how weird we are. And, even if we can look at this red-eyed tree frog and maybe see a little bit more of ourselves in it, I think that I just have so much like empathy for like weird, ugly animals like the Suriname toad. Those are its eggs in its back, and they'll hatch out of its back, which just freaks me out so much, but I just love it. And I do want to say the Suriname toad is still really charismatic relative to a lot of other species, right? It's like, it's pretty big. It's still like kind of got a face. It's uh, still, shaped like a toad. So relative to like a nematode, like a worm, it's definitely still more charismatic. And then also monarchs, of course, they're beautiful, but a lot of people, they're still insects. A lot of people with phobia of butterflies, and they don't really have faces the way a lot of other animals, even animals we think of as creepy, have faces that you can look at and connect with. So it's definitely very subjective. People will connect with different animals, but in general, um, a beautiful butterfly like a monarch, as opposed to maybe a more drab looking moth, is going to get more attention. And there's a lot of studies that have shown this, and a lot of drama within the academic and scientific community about it. I've heard stories about papers about this issue, especially about charismatic animals getting more attention in academic papers. Like if someone studies that, there will be like an uproar when they present it. People will be like cheering um, or really upset if they feel like if they're studying a charismatic animal and they feel like it's getting a bad rap. And that's not usually how it goes at conferences. So it really, really whips people up. And I've also heard about stings where people will submit like really similar papers about more versus less charismatic animals to scientific papers and then document or scientific journals and document which ones are more likely to be accepted. This is far from the first or last study of its kind, but I just wanted to highlight one particular um, study about the prioritization of charismatic animals. And this is specifically conservation journals. Uh, this this data looks pretty damning, right? Like, it, I think these three bars represent three different journals, but mammals are by far the most represented species. I know that um, you can also break it down by vertebrates and invertebrates. Here we say that reptiles don't get much attention, but still get a lot more attention than invertebrates if you pit invertebrates and vertebrates together. And it's, mammals do not represent a very big percentage of the population of species on Earth, but it's very, very clear that they get more attention. I don't know. I I'm not really here to say whether this is absolutely a bad thing. I well, actually, no. it's I think it's a bad thing, but I don't think that it's you know evil that people are studying mammals. Like, I think this is all excellent science that's happening. I think all this knowledge is valuable, but I really empathize with folks who are studying invertebrates and just feel like they're not getting funding priority, they're not getting publication priority. Another really interesting thing that I noticed about this paper is that they observed that mammal appearance, when you just break down the mammals, uh, they're more like larger mammals and mammals that these researchers had determined to be more charismatic, like more cute or more fluffy, they were more likely to get attention as well. So it's not just mammals are charismatic versus reptiles are less charismatic. It's also just more charismatic mammals are getting more attention in these journals. So with all this in mind, what do we do about it, especially as community scientists? The first question to ask is how much this really matters. Uh, like how much of an impact is human intervention in what's already happening to monarchs, which of course is a result of human activity. How much of an impact is that going to have? Uh, I this is not to. I mean, I think that community scientists are some of the most valuable, uh, community members, um, or it's one of the most valuable like science initiatives, rather. Is community science, and yeah, I have no opinion about who's a more valuable community member, but I think that community science is one of the most valuable initiatives, and uh, I don't want it to stop. I don't want conservation efforts to stop. I'm going to make that very clear. But as far as community scientists prioritizing animals that they think are really cute or really beautiful, I don't know if I have an answer to this, but is it like how big of a problem is that? That's something that I would love to have a conversation about. And then the next question is, things are going to get worse as the planet gets warmer, right? Like, monarchs aren't endangered right now, but as things get warmer, it might be really valuable to have it will be really valuable, in fact, to have the amount of data that we've collected through the monarch larva monitoring project to see how their populations might start to decline or what's going to happen to their populations as the world changes. I don't think there's anything wrong with ever, having, I don't think there's such thing as too much data. And then the next question is more within the scientific community. The authors of the study that I just talked about, they suggested or proposed that the major journals that they were featuring like have an initiative to give publication priority to less charismatic species or less commonly featured species. And there's also been a conversation about prioritizing funding to teams or to scientists who are studying a less studied, less charismatic animal. So that's one conversation that's happening. But I also, stepping into the world of insects was actually a phrase that Maggie used that I thought was really beautiful when I chatted with her about this a few months ago. But I think that a cute or charismatic or beautiful insect or animal, if that's someone's entry point into caring a lot about conservation, especially if it's a good way to get children hooked on thinking about animals and conservation, then once again, I have no complaints. I think that's great. Yeah, so once again, I really just wanted to talk about this conversation, this debate, rather than making a specific point. But I just Maggie again doing a monarch larva survey. I just really, have loved the chances I've had to connect with community scientists and to be a community scientist through initiatives like this. And I still love monarchs. And I want to just turn it over to all of you now. I'm curious, just happy to take questions, and also curious what the next step that makes sense to anyone else is, or what whether you agree with Dr. Davis, or what you think we should do about this this debate.